There are going to be people watching this who think that writing isn't for them. There are going to be people here who think, well, I don't even have the time to bloody read, let alone write. Well, you're wrong. If you took 30 minutes a day of the time sunk into social media and used it to write, well, you could complete a novel in a year. This isn't about shaming people into doing something, though. I want to try and transmit to you why I think writing is so valuable and why I think you should start doing it. I love writing about board games, and I think you would too if you tried. But before we get to that, I want to commit an act of egregious self-indulgence masked as offering context, so I'm going to talk about me for a bit. Before the age of 32, I had completed one piece of writing. Well, of course that's not strictly true. I'd written stuff for school and college, but that arid shit doesn't count. This one piece of writing was an essay, written from the point of view of a prudish British person on the Teutonic proclivity for nudity. It was butchered and then published in Vienna's English language newspaper. I was living there at the time. Then I didn't complete anything else for another 5 years. Not an essay, not a story, not a poem. My first piece took me 27 years and my second 32. This is probably unremarkable for most people. I'm sure the majority of people glide serenely through life, never touching pen to paper for pleasure. Not me, though. Up until that point, I'd written all my life. Half-finished sketches, first chapters of novels, headless stories, mostly built but never given the spark of life. If I hadn't thrown them away, you would be able to trawl through piles of A4 notebooks, all polluted by my indecipherable scrawl, a grand testament fashioned out of pulped wood to fecklessness and insecurity, evidence that I'd never sat down and actually completed something. Why, though? The funny thing is, I've always known it's something to do, well, with your station in life. A station in life is a pernicious limitation that is rigorously policed by those around you. It has other names, and I'm sure that it exists in some form in every culture. It can be called not getting above yourself, or having a big head, or being pretentious. There is an assumption that the carefully delineated stratas of society are surreptitiously enforced by the top-hatted Etonites at the top of the food chain. But whether it be middle-class etiquette, upper-class propriety, or salt-of-the-earth groundedness, we are so often held in place by the people who love us most. The strategy used on me was taking the piss. It was having a laugh. If anything strayed out of the narrow confines of what was expected for a bloke from my background, it was to be derided. When I'd sing, I was laughed at and told to shut up. When I talked about wanting to be an actor, I would be mocked for wanting to do anything so fanciful. The thing is, though, that these reactions were reflexive. They were fucked up in their turn, as Philip Larkin wrote. They had no option but to react this way. And these little lesions on your ego stay with you, but when I look at the real evidence, my father's inevitable floods of tears whenever he saw me on stage, my mother's wide-eyed surprise when I sang a solo in the school production, even though she'd heard me sing 1,000 times, it made me realise that they didn't want to jeer, they didn't really want to keep me in my place, but what chance did they have when that was their life too? We don't know ourselves when we're young. That's why the Jesuits are so keen to get us then. We are all too willing to believe the things that people tell us about ourselves, and even if we on the outside disregard them, they wiggle around our subconscious and paralyse us when we try to work. It's why it took me so long to complete a piece of writing. Whenever I'd start to scribble, a faint voice would whisper, this isn't for you, Stick to your own thing. It's still there too, that little voice. It's just bloody-mindedness has grown greater than my doubt. Not by much, but still greater. It's called imposter syndrome now. It's been characterised as that feeling that you're not good enough. That was really never an issue for me. I'm blockheadedly proud of the work I do, without any good reason to be so, by the way. So much about being what you want to be is just assuming the identity, and that has always been hard for me because I've always felt an imposter in a more sophisticated world, that I'm just some council estate scumbag and that I don't deserve to mix in the circles of those born rich enough to be able to be writers. That's always paralysed my pen back then, that thought yelling at me from the back of my brain. The only reason that I've been able to complete anything now is that I've realised that the scratch of the pen on paper is louder than that, and it can drown it out. It's a good question. It certainly isn't for the money. The answer is that I like to shoot everything I experience through the meat grinder of my writing. It's as if it hasn't happened until I commit it to paper. The drafting and redrafting of your thoughts on something helps to put it into the right files in your brain. There is a feeling of ownership over experience if it's been crystallised into words. It is the solidity of the completed sentence that makes something indelible. And rather than the instant moment of a photograph, a piece of writing has duration. A piece of writing encapsulates a moment that is far longer than the time it takes a flashbulb to go off. Also, writing about these games gives a profound connection to this hobby. I don't feel like I'll ever actually design a game, but my writing allows me to think about the process of games. It gets me into the after party, even if it doesn't get me backstage. My writing about games is the grappling hook that pulls me closer to the world of gaming, the community of gaming, and ultimately, the people of gaming. So a lot of people may think that they write every day, but, and I can't stress this enough, social media is not writing. This is why social media is so compelling, why it's so successful, and why its cancerous tendrils have started to rot our society. Social media is speaking. It's just that you use written characters instead of sounds. The spontaneity, the brevity, the reactivity, it all has the characteristics of verbal diarrhea. An insult that mars a person's character or an empty call of support can be fired off with no thought whatsoever. It's not just speaking, it's speaking without engaging the brain. There is none of the deliberation of writing and all of the instant thoughtlessness of speech. You're blurting out your thoughts, but instead of an idle comment told to a loved one, you're blurting it all at a load of strangers. I don't think you should be on social media. Well, not as much. I think you should be writing. I think you should be flipping open your laptop or an A4 pad and writing something, and I think that the act of cobbling a piece together will benefit you and those around you. It's the community of games that gets its hooks into you. That can mean those real animals you share a space with, or the series of ones and zeros that coalesce into people at the end of a cable. This is why conventions are so wonderful. They are a filling station that you go to top up on your love for the hobby. You meet people at demo tables and at food stands, in crowded hotel lobbies and low-ceilinged pubs. You come away from conventions exhausted but hopped up on the realisation that people are great. You settle back into your life afterwards and want to stay connected to that hobby that was delivered in such a concentrated dose at the convention. So you go on Twitter. If you were to take Twitter as a snapshot of the hobby, you would think that gaming was horribly fractured. You would think that there was an unbreachable divide. This is because Twitter in particular has turned us all into bumper stickers. The sentence on our Twitter bio, the only thing worth knowing about us. Good parent? So what? Supportive friend? It doesn't matter. Have you paid homage to the cause of the week of your particular side? Do you have the right emojis next to your name? Is your hatred of the other side vociferous enough? If you answered no to any of these questions, get out, because we don't need you. We show two faces to the world, one that understands that the real world requires understanding, compromise, and sometimes even biting your lip, and the other face, stripped of all nuance, endlessly searching to harvest little red hearts. Writing can be an antidote to this noxious reductiveness. Writing is a deliberative act. It requires thought and it requires time. More than that, it requires insight. As sentences appear, you take a step back from your id and let a little superego step in. You can start to consider, well, what's really important? Let's talk about Board Game Geek. I find it hard to believe that there is any single resource that is as important to any industry as BGG is to board games. It is the truly egalitarian meeting place for those who have a fleeting interest in the hobby, are enthusiastic players, or the biggest creators in the industry. The wealth of information is staggering, yet it is more than just a database. It's a community. It is the true village square for the hobby of board gaming. There was a claim last year around the Golden Geek Awards that they were pricing out people of low incomes because of the requirement that a person pay 20 geek gold to vote. A stupider proposition has yet to be put forward on the internet. Many more of greater gravity for sure, but in terms of pure idiocy, this is kissing the peak of the mountain. Firstly, geek gold isn't real money. Secondly, a person can earn geek gold for posting a review to the site. Post 20 reviews and there you are, there is your voting fee. This is because BGG wants you to be a part of the community and encourages this by asking you to collate your thoughts and deliver them through a medium that eschews the hot take and the snap judgment. There is nothing wrong with disagreement, even vociferous disagreement, yet it should be respectful. Board Game Geek encourages this by inviting you to be a part of its community, and it maintains it by asking you to write, not to scream with emojis and 280 characters. There is no board game community on Twitter, just disparate groups looking for the approval of their tranche by ripping apart the other side. Put the phone down, go over to your computer and type. Something good, something half-arsed. It doesn't matter, but write. Don't shriek. There are people watching this that won't believe me, but hear me out. I've always loved to write. I love wrestling with a sentence. I love taming the language. I love knowing when to let the language run and when to bring it to heel. That may not be the case for you, but I believe that writing is a case of destination and not journey. The joy that you get as the result of writing is not a joy easily earned, and as such is a joy that is deeper when you eventually receive it. It probably won't happen after your first piece, it might not happen after your 10th, but there will come a moment. You may be looking at the folder you store your writing in, or the list of blogs you've posted to BGG. It may be the time when you read a comment that praises what you've written. But a moment will come where that collection of words on digital paper that you have created will warm you. You will realise that there are thousands of words in thousands of unique configurations that hadn't existed before you had the industry to configure them. They will remind you of a particular time of your life, because no matter how hard you try to prevent it, the written word will always reflect something of its author and where that author was at that particular time. As your eye traverses your syntactic constellations, shooting stars of memory will light up the sky and transport you to those moments with those people at that time. Your writing will give you this, and it's an incredible return on your meagre investment. Those nights, worn into insignificance by the tyrant memory, will be vital and significant once more. This is the reward you get for writing about games. This piece here will reward me at some point later down the line. My life, here and now, will be brought back to life. It's magic. Also, if you put them in the right place, what you write will be read. When I read pieces by people who are unapologetic advocates of this hobby, I'm exhilarated by them. Whether they be professional journalists or amateur scribblers, their words nourish me, and you can be sure that your words will nourish others. So, sometime in the next month, flip open your laptop, just tap for a few minutes, string a few words together. Don't waste those keystrokes on Twitter. Plant a few paragraphs into the fertile ground of the community, and you will watch them bloom. And to those who already write, thank you. You transport the hobby to me and help me to define my place in it. Thank you for listening. And if you like this, please subscribe to the show. And if you consider this valuable in any way whatsoever, and I understand if you don't, you can support this venture at patreon.com/5G4D.